I'd like to talk to you about the first principle in periodization. It's probably one of the most important principles that we'll spend time on, and that's the principle of accountability. Accountability is the most misunderstood concept today, I think. Most people equate accountability with consequences. In fact, everywhere you hear the word in society, accountability is associated with bad behavior, poor performance, negative consequences. And oftentimes when we talk about accountability in our boot camps and group sessions, people cringe. They want nothing to do with it. And it's because we mistakenly believe that accountability is something that can and must be imposed. That's not accountability. That's consequences. The fact of the matter is it's impossible to hold someone accountable. And anytime we look for someone to hold us accountable, we really give away our power. It's a very disempowering position. Because at the heart of accountability is free will choice. In the end, we choose to account for that which we choose. And that's it, period. At the heart of accountability is ownership. It's choice. It's the understanding that the quality of my choices determines the quality of my life. It's the realization that even though I don't control the circumstances, I do control how I respond. See, the fact of the matter is great men and women are accountable. Greatness cannot be achieved without accountability. And yet all these old notions of what accountability is gets in the way of us being effective. So I'd like to begin to challenge your thinking around accountability, to move off of this notion of accountability as punishment to be avoided or consequences for negative behavior. Accountability is really ownership. It's choice. It's freedom of choice. It's recognizing that in any situation that we have choice, that we have that freedom of choice. Accountability is the fact that there are no have-tos in life. You know what I mean by have-tos? It's those things that we say, boy, I really don't want to do this, but I have to do it, and I go ahead and I do it. But there's a big difference between realizing that even in those situations, I still have choice. Because when I come from life as a have-to, it's not very empowering. And in fact, it creates a result that is not very effective. Versus when I recognize that as everything I do in life is ultimately a choice, that's a much more empowering position because I begin to take ownership of that. And yet accountability can be very scary because part of accountability is it forces us to confront the truth. And the Bible said the truth will set you free. What it didn't say is it might tick you off along the way. The fact of the matter is if I'm accountable, then I have to confront the reality of my situation. See, I've created it, good or bad, by the choices I've made. And so, in order to be accountable, I first have to be willing to own that. In order to change it, I have to own it. I have to take ownership of it. If someone or something else is my problem, I'm always going to have that problem, aren't I? Because I can't control others. But when I take ownership of that, when I take ownership of my goals, when I take ownership of my results, of my actions, of my thinking, now I can begin to change things. And it's interesting because when my focus shifts, it shifts automatically. I don't have to force it. It shifts from blame to possibility, from problem to solution, from helplessness to power. Ultimately, accountability is incredibly empowering. It's fundamental to success in any endeavor that you might take on. It's not just a business concept, it's a life principle. You see, the more I understand accountability as ownership and choice, the more effective I'm going to be in all areas of my life. That's why it's a principle. It's a principle that affects every relationship that I'm in. If I'm accountable for my relationships, then my relationships are going to be much more effective. I remember when I first got married, I heard this notion, and it sounded like it made sense that my marriage was, an effective marriage was 50-50. And as my wife and I approach marriage that way, what we quickly found is that approach doesn't yield 100%. That approach yields less than that. In fact, over time, that approach continues to yield less and less of that. And then someone told me that the Bible spoke about my marriage being 100% my accountability. And I thought about that, and I thought, if I approach my marriage that way, then I'm always going to have a great marriage. Because I'm not relying on my wife. I'm relying on me. It's my accountability. And every relationship I have, I'm 100% accountable for that relationship. It comes back to my choices, my freedom, the things I'm doing to impact that. In the end, accountability is probably the most important principle that we'll ever share with you because it impacts everything you do. It impacts your relationship, your ability to execute, and ultimately your results. So I want to challenge you this day to begin to change your notion of what accountability is, to begin to grasp the true power of accountability. And as you read through that section, read it a couple times. Come back to it often because it's fundamental to high performance and your success.